Previously, the Korean team had been fending off wave after wave of ants as they headed back toward their nest. Janho, desperate to turn the tide, urged Choi to crank up his attack power, but Choi hesitated, warning that if he did, they might run out of oxygen in the confined space. Still, the Korean hunters had no other choice but to rely on Choi's fire attacks to escape the dire situation. As Choi began to struggle under the pressure and the ants pressed in closer, a sudden flash caught everyone's attention. A shadow warrior appeared, halting the advancing ants in their tracks. Yunho, stunned by the appearance, stared at the Black Knight, trying to recall where he had seen it before. The figure was familiar, yet he couldn't immediately place it. The shadow then sent a signal back to Jinwoo, who was in the city. Realizing how critical the situation had become, Jinwoo immediately activated his skill, Shadow Exchange, to return to the battlefield. Meanwhile, a cameraman freaked out as two huge ants charged straight for him. Fear filled his face as he resigned himself to his fate. Suddenly, both ants were pierced by a sword, which was Jinwoo's sword. Back at the broadcasting station in Korea, the crew shut down the live broadcast after seeing the desperate condition of the S-rank hunters who were on the brink of death. One of the crew members told the broadcasting chief that they were getting flooded with complaints from viewers. The chief felt like the broadcast couldn't go on, but just as he was about to give the order to shut things down, a crew member reported a mysterious figure suddenly showing up at the raid site. The chief stared at the monitor in disbelief and ordered the broadcast to continue no matter what. Deep down, he knew Korea's fate was now in the hands of this hunter. Jinwoo, having used his shadow exchange ability, arrived on Jeju Island instantly with his vast army of shadow soldiers. His sharp gaze surveyed the battlefield. Among his soldiers were Iron, the towering warrior clad in heavy armor, Igris, the swift knight, Tusk, the powerful mage, and Tank, the hulking beast. A squad of orcs marched alongside them, weapons in hand, ready for battle. With his usual calm demeanor, Jinwoo quickly assessed the situation. He turned to Iron, his loyal shadow soldier, who immediately understood the silent command. Iron thumped his chest, signaling his readiness. Without delay, he lumbered forward, his enormous body moving with intent. Drawing in a deep breath, Iron unleashed a thunderous roar that echoed across the battlefield. His skill, the shout of provocation, had its desired effect. Every ant within range turned their attention to Iron, their instincts forcing them to attack this new formidable threat. Jinwoo smiled, impressed by Iron's intelligence, then drew his Demon King's dagger. In an instant, Jinwoo moved like lightning, slashing and killing multiple ants with just one quick move. Meanwhile, Tusk, his shadow mage, activated a magic barrier to protect the injured Korean hunters. The battle had now shifted in Jinwoo's favor, and it was clear that the tide was turning. Ma Dong-wook was confused, not understanding what was happening. Yanho explained that now that Jinwoo was here, they didn't have to worry anymore. Meanwhile, Jinwoo was moving super fast, slashing ants one after another without stopping. Next to him, Igris was showing off his deadly sword skills, taking down ants with perfect accuracy. Iron was going wild, smashing ants without mercy, and Tank was swallowing ants in large chunks. As the battle continued, Jinwoo realized he needed to end this fight quickly. Standing among the dead ant bodies, he calmly said, "Arise." Instantly, the dead ants turned into shadow soldiers, standing up with a dark, scary aura. The cameraman, who was capturing everything, felt a chill of fear seeing this happen. Seconds later, he received a direct order from the broadcasting station to air the footage live as the whole country was watching. The newly created shadow ants attacked the remaining ants without hesitation, slaughtering them mercilessly. Jinwoo then approached the injured Korean hunters and handed them healing potions. The hunters were stunned, watching their wounds heal instantly as if it was some kind of magic. Jinwoo checked on Hunter Cha, who was badly injured and unconscious. Ma Dong-wook looked worried, but Jinwoo admitted that his power wasn't enough to heal her completely. Knowing that more ants could arrive anytime, Jinwoo ordered the Korean team to leave the nest immediately. Suddenly, Jinwoo felt a terrifying presence approaching. It was the Ant King. The Ant King walked in, mumbling something about looking for a king. Yanho was shocked, realizing that Gon Hoji must have been killed by the Ant King. Jinwoo stepped forward, telling Ma Dong-wook to take care of Hunter Cha while he faced the Ant King alone. The Ant King stared at Jinwoo and asked, "Are you the king of humans?" Jinwoo smirked and sarcastically replied, "Since when did bugs start talking?" The Ant King then released a powerful and scary aura, trying to intimidate Jinwoo, but Jinwoo simply grinned and said, "Now you really look like a bug." The intense battle between Jinwoo and the Ant King was about to begin. 5 minutes ago, the live broadcast suddenly stopped, leaving everyone confused and worried. People wondered what had happened to the hunters inside the dungeon. Joel felt uneasy, fearing the worst. Ji was troubled, thinking about the giant ant that appeared right before the broadcast cut off. Park Jong was frustrated, upset that the broadcast ended at such a crucial moment. Unite, caught in the confusion, urgently tried to find out what was going on. News channels quickly tried to update everyone. They reported that Min Bungyu had died, and the other hunters were still trapped in the tunnels. No one knew if they would make it out alive. Just when the tension was at its highest, a shocking update came in. An unknown hunter had appeared at the battle scene. The live broadcast resumed, and everyone watched anxiously as a powerful ant appeared on screen. Meanwhile, in Japan, Matsumoto and Sugimoto had a serious discussion. Matsumoto was stunned to hear that the ant could talk like a human and had killed Guruji. Sugimoto, who was monitoring the situation, reported that the ant had returned to the queen's chamber. This news shocked Matsumoto even more, especially when Sugimoto mentioned that the South Korean hunters were still alive. Even stranger, another mysterious source of mana was detected. The tension grew as Matsumoto demanded a live broadcast from the South Korean press, eager to see what was happening. Back in South Korea, a different kind of tension filled Gina's home. Kyung-hee struggled with the TV, which had suddenly stopped working, making Gina frustrated. But her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about her brother, Jinwoo, who had left in a hurry without explaining why. While Kyung-hee kept trying to fix the TV, Gina rushed to her room and grabbed her phone, hoping to find answers. Gina's eyes widened in shock as she stared at her phone screen, frozen by what she saw. Jin was standing in the middle of the chaos at the Hunter Association. Gogi gripped his armrest tightly as he watched the broadcast. His emotions were a mix of hope and determination. His associate urged him to stay calm, but Goguni couldn't look away. Jinwoo had appeared, and that changed everything. The Ant King made the first move, charging at Jinwoo with incredible speed and power. Swinging his massive arm, he landed a crushing blow directly on Jinwoo's face. The sheer force nearly bent Jinwoo backward, but he held his ground, planting his feet deep into the earth. The impact was so powerful that the ground beneath them shattered, sending cracks and debris flying in all directions. A shockwave rippled through the cavern, making it tremble from the intensity of the strike. Hunters Black Yunho and Choi Jongin watched in stunned silence. They hadn't expected Jinwoo to get this close to such a terrifying opponent, and they feared he had underestimated the Ant King's strength. The Ant King, convinced that he had mortally wounded his opponent, sneered. His voice echoed through the battlefield as he mocked Jinwoo, claiming he was too weak to be a king. But then, to everyone's shock, Jinwoo didn't fall. Instead, he spat out blood with disdain, as if brushing off an inconvenience. His cold, determined eyes locked onto the creature. Without hesitation, he activated Commander's Touch, channeling his mana into his left fist. Jinwoo's punch slammed into the Ant King's belly, sending powerful shockwaves through its massive body. The creature stumbled backward, its legs shaking under the force of the blow. Its eyes widened in shock. Before the Ant King could recover, Jinwoo moved in. His right fist blurred through the air, striking the Ant King's face with a sickening crunch. The impact was immense, the sheer force lifting the Ant King off the ground and launching it skyward. The Ant King was barely visible as it was sent flying, crashing through the cavern with such force that it left a trail of destruction in its wake. The moment it slammed into the cavern wall, the impact was so massive that the rock face caved in, like it had been struck by a meteor. The entire underground space trembled, the shockwave reverberating through the battlefield. Nearby, the cameraman and stood frozen, their jaws hanging open in disbelief. Domwook, usually composed, was left speechless. How could a hunter, supposedly a mage type, possess such devastating physical strength? Even Baek Yunho, who had some idea of Jinwoo's power, was completely stunned. He had never imagined Jinwoo could be this strong. But the Ant King wasn't finished. Roaring in fury, its eyes burned with rage as it lunged forward to strike back. Jinwoo remained calm, observing the creature closely. He noticed its surprising resilience, likely due to its thick exoskeleton. A cold smirk crossed his face. This was starting to get annoying. With both hands clasped together, the Ant King launched another devastating strike at Jinwoo, but Jinwoo blocked it effortlessly. The battle turned into a brutal close-quarters clash. The two exchanged blow after blow, their strikes shaking the cavern itself. Jinwoo swung with all his strength, his fist crashing into the Ant King's armored body. The monster retaliated just as fiercely, hammering Jinwoo on the back of the head. Their battle was relentless, each attack met with an equally powerful counterattack. Jinwoo's aura flared, his attacks growing even faster and more precise. Meanwhile, the Ant King's red eyes burned with fury, striking back with deadly precision. Neither backed down. The waves of mana surging from their fight were so intense that even the cameraman, an A-rank hunter, struggled to stay on his feet, nearly passing out from the overwhelming pressure. Then, the Ant King realized something terrifying: it was losing. For the first time, the creature felt powerless in a battle of raw strength. Its mind raced. Who was this human? How was he stronger than the Ant King itself? Though Jinwoo had taken some hits, he didn't slow down. The Ant King's once indestructible exoskeleton, harder than any known metal, began to crack. Thin fractures appeared on its body, proof that Jinwoo's blows were breaking through. Jinwoo's gaze hardened. With a final, devastating punch, he shattered more of the Ant King's armor. The cracks spread like a spider web, the monster's body weakening by the second. The Ant King was in shock. It knew it didn't have much time left. But before it could react, Jinwoo struck again. His next punch smashed into the Ant King's face, snapping its head backward. Even with its reinforced exoskeleton, the Ant King felt the impact, struggling to regain balance. Desperate, the Ant King played its final card. It opened its mouth, unleashing a venomous needle attached to a long, tentacle-like appendage, a deadly close-range attack aimed straight at Jinwoo's face. Jinwoo jerked his head back, barely dodging in time, but the needle still grazed his cheek. For a brief moment, the Ant King felt satisfaction. It had finally landed a hit. The poison quickly spread through Jinwoo's body. But this wasn't just any toxin. This was a lethal venom, unlike anything a normal hunter could withstand. After consuming a cone snail, the Ant King had gained an incredibly lethal ability, the power to use paralysis poison, one of nature's deadliest toxins. But in the Ant King's body, infused with concentrated mana, the poison had become even more potent, capable of bringing down even the strongest opponents. The Ant King looked down at Jinwoo, confidence gleaming in its eyes. This was it. It was so certain the poison had weakened Jinwoo beyond recovery. With victory in sight, the creature lunged forward, its massive mandibles aimed straight at Jinwoo, ready to end the fight once and for all. But Jinwoo was far from defeated. Just as the Ant King's attack came crashing toward him, Jinwoo raised his left hand and blocked the claw with ease. The Ant King froze in shock. It couldn't comprehend how Jinwoo was still moving, let alone countering its attack. Seizing the opportunity, Jinwoo launched a devastating punch with his right fist. The blow sent the Ant King tumbling across the den, the impact leaving the creature reeling in disbelief. Its confidence shattered, the monster realized too late that this battle was far from over. At that moment, a notification appeared before Jinwoo: detoxification successful. Jinwoo quickly understood what had happened. The Ant King had felt a brief moment of triumph, convinced its poison had worked. But thanks to Jinwoo's high sense stat, he could now perceive emotions, and the Ant King's confidence had just turned into fear. Even his teammates were growing anxious, their concern increasing as the battle dragged on. Jinwoo had no intention of letting this fight continue any longer. Determined to end things quickly, he sprang into action. With a powerful leap, he soared through the air, closing the gap between himself and the Ant King in an instant. He aimed a flying kick straight at the creature, intending to crush it in one final strike. But when his foot slammed into the ground, the Ant King was already gone. From a distance, Baek Yunho and Choi Jong-in watched in confusion, their eyes darting around the battlefield, desperately searching for the vanished creature. Jinwoo, however, remained calm. He tilted his head up, and there it was. The Ant King had taken to the air, its powerful wings carrying it high above their heads. This situation played right into Jinwoo's advantage. Thanks to his heightened senses, he could easily track the Ant King by sensing its emotions. The creature had gone from panic to nervousness, but now it seemed almost excited, as if it had finally come up with a new strategy. The Ant King had realized the truth: brute strength wouldn't work against Jinwoo. It now understood that Jinwoo was not only resistant to poison but also too powerful to overpower directly. If raw strength was Jinwoo's greatest weapon, then engaging him in a head-on fight was a losing battle. Instead, the Ant King decided to rely on its greatest asset, speed. Its massive frame contracted, concentrating all its energy on enhancing its speed. At the same time, its claws elongated into razor-sharp blades, signaling the shift in tactics. Jinwoo watched closely, immediately understanding what was happening and anticipating the change in attack patterns. He reached into his inventory and summoned 2 daggers, gripping them tightly. The air grew thick with tension as the battle entered a new phase. Then, in a blink, the Ant King vanished with unbelievable speed. It dove toward Jinwoo, moving so fast it was almost impossible to see. But Jinwoo was ready. As the Ant King's bladed claws slashed toward him, Jinwoo effortlessly dodged, his movements fluid and precise. The Ant King's eyes widened in shock. Jinwoo wasn't just keeping up, he was one step ahead. Seizing the opening, Jinwoo spun sharply and countered. His dagger flashed in a blur as he launched a relentless flurry of attacks. The Ant King barely had time to react, its defenses crumbling under the onslaught. Jinwoo landed lightly on the ground, but he didn't pause for even a second. In an instant, he dashed forward again, closing the gap between them with blinding speed. The 2 warriors clashed once more, their weapons colliding in a storm of rapid, ringing strikes that echoed across the battlefield. With every exchange, the Ant King's confidence wavered. A terrifying realization dawned upon it: Jinwoo was just as fast, no, he was getting faster. Each passing second, Jinwoo's movements grew sharper, his strikes more precise, his speed more overwhelming, as if his body was just now warming up. As Jinwoo observed the battle, he recalled his previous fights, analyzing every movement, every exchange. He wasn't just keeping up, he was adapting. The Ant King was as strong as the Demon King Jinwoo had previously defeated, perhaps even stronger. But Jinwoo had grown since then. He had leveled up, gained more power, and now wielded a far deadlier weapon. And more importantly, the Ant King was weakening. The creature's exoskeleton, once seemingly indestructible, now bore visible cracks, worsening with every attack. During their initial clash, the Ant King had managed to hold its ground, but now it was slipping, step by step. The Ant King was being forced backward, unable to resist Jinwoo's relentless assault. With each retreating step, more cracks spread across its armor, signaling its approaching downfall. Jinwoo smirked, his confidence growing with each advantage gained. The moment the Ant King took another step back, Jinwoo lunged forward, closing the gap in an instant. Activating his skill, Critical Strike, he timed his attack with deadly precision. His dagger, previously unable to break through, finally pierced the Ant King's armor. Jinwoo didn't stop. He unleashed a barrage of critical strikes, each one hitting with greater intensity. The Ant King barely had time to react, its defenses crumbling under the onslaught. Then, a notification flashed before Jinwoo's eyes: his critical strike had been upgraded to its maximum level, Mutilate. The Ant King sensed danger. Panic surged through its mind as it attempted to escape. The buzzing of its wings filled the cavern as it tried to take to the air. But Jinwoo wasn't about to let that happen. With a swift motion, he activated Mutilate and slashed at the Ant King multiple times. The results were immediate and brutal. His blades carved deep, ripping apart the Ant King's already fragile armor. The damage was devastating, far more than any of his previous strikes. Realizing just how lethal Mutilate had become, Jinwoo pressed the attack. He stabbed at the Ant King's weak points, each strike faster, deadlier than the last. The sound of his daggers slicing through flesh echoed through the cavern, followed by the Ant King's agonized screams. Then, Jinwoo struck with pinpoint accuracy. With a single, merciless slash, he severed one of the Ant King's long black limbs. The detached arm hit the ground with a heavy thud, and the Ant King let out a piercing roar, its entire body convulsing from the loss. For the first time in the battle, the Ant King felt fear. Its pride was shattered. Its strength, speed, and poison all useless against Jinwoo. With nothing left, the Ant King began to despair. But then, a thought struck it. It still had one last card to play. Throwing its head back, the Ant King let out a deafening screech. The cavern trembled as its summoning cry echoed through the tunnels. An entire swarm of ants, thousands strong, rushed toward the den. This was the Ant King's final move. It wasn't just calling for reinforcements, it was trying to reclaim its pride, to turn the tide of battle in its favor. As the swarm flooded into the cavern, the Ant King lifted its head proudly, believing its army's sheer numbers would overwhelm Jinwoo. But then, it saw something that shook it to its core. Jinwoo was grinning. The Ant King froze. Why was this human smiling in the face of such overwhelming odds? Before the Ant King could comprehend the meaning of that grin, Jinwoo's calm, confident voice echoed through the cavern. He was giving an order. The shadows beneath him stirred. The monarch's domain, which Jinwoo had activated earlier, was still in full effect, amplifying the power of his shadow soldiers. And with that single command, the real battle began. At Jinwoo's command, his shadow soldiers surged forward, their thunderous footsteps reverberating throughout the cavern. The clash was instant and brutal. Dark shadows, pulsing with a fierce purple aura, collided with the swarming tide of red and black. The battlefield became a maelstrom of chaos, where raw strength met sheer ferocity in a relentless struggle for dominance. At the heart of the carnage stood Igris. His blade gleamed, slicing through the enemy ranks with terrifying precision. Each swing cleaved through countless foes, leaving nothing but ruin in his wake. He was unstoppable, an executioner in motion. The mere sight of him sent terror surging through the enemy forces. But he wasn't alone. The high-level orcs charged in next, their brute strength breaking through enemy defenses like they were made of paper. Their massive blades tore through the horde, leaving behind only destruction. They fought with an unmatched bloodlust, cutting down everything that dared stand before them. Jinwoo watched from above, his cold gaze unyielding. The battle was shifting, but he had no intention of letting it drag on. Raising his hand, he summoned another powerful ally. Tusk emerged. Jinwoo's voice was firm as he spoke to him. He placed the orb of avarice in Tusk's hands, making his orders clear: target only the ants. Any harm to the humans would not be tolerated. Tusk nodded solemnly. Then, he grew, activating his Hymn of Giants. Tusk's size increased dramatically, towering over the battlefield. He surveyed the chaos before him, then raised his hand. A massive fireball formed above his palm. And in the next instant, hell was unleashed. Tusk activated his Hymn of the Fire Dragon, and pillars of fire erupted across the battlefield, engulfing the enemy in a storm of flames. The ants screamed as they burned, their bodies turning to ash under the sheer devastation of Tusk's magic. Taegu stared in shock. His mind refused to accept what he was witnessing. Was this truly a summoned creature? Dongwook was equally stunned. This wasn't just a summon, this was a force of destruction, a being so powerful that it seemed otherworldly. And amidst it all, the Ant King trembled. The once undisputed ruler of the island, the creature that had devoured all in its path, now felt something it had never known before: true fear. As it watched its army crumble, its confidence shattered. How could this be happening? For the first time, the Ant King realized there was a limit to its strength, and it had just met that limit. Survival. That was all that mattered now. In an instant, its instincts took over. The Ant King no longer cared about its kingdom or its soldiers. They were all meaningless now. Thanks to the healing ability it had stolen from a human, its severed wing had already regenerated. Without hesitation, the Ant King took to the skies, its only thought to escape. Jinwoo narrowed his eyes. He had noticed something strange. The Ant King was using Minban Yu's healing ability. A beast using a hunter's skill? Jinwoo's mind sharpened. This creature was different. It didn't just evolve its strength, it could absorb the abilities of its victims by devouring them. Even so, it wasn't going anywhere. Just as the Ant King tried to flee, Jinwoo extended his hand. Commander's touch. An invisible force crashed down on the Ant King, slamming it into the ground with bone-crushing force. The impact was brutal. The Ant King hit the cave floor with a sickening thud, fluid spraying from its mouth as its body shuddered from the force. Jinwoo began to walk forward. The once mighty ruler of the island lay broken before him, its body trembling, its eyes wide with terror. And yet, Jinwoo showed no mercy. The fear in the Ant King's eyes was so raw, so absolute, that for the briefest moment, Jinwoo almost felt pity. The once proud ruler of the island, the predator who had toyed with the other hunters as if they were nothing, was now nothing more than a broken, trembling creature, desperately crawling away, clawing at the dirt, trying to escape. But Jinwoo wasn't about to let it go. With cold determination, he activated Mutilate and surged forward, closing the distance in an instant. His daggers flashed, their edges glowing blue. And before the Ant King could react, Jinwoo unleashed a relentless storm of slashes. His strikes were so fast they blurred into a web of shimmering energy, cutting through the Ant King's armor like paper. The creature had no chance. Each devastating blow tore through its body. And within moments, the Ant King collapsed, defeated, broken beyond repair. Then, a notification appeared in Jinwoo's vision: "You have defeated the enemy. Level up." But Jinwoo barely acknowledged it. A shout broke through the aftermath of battle. Baek Yunho's voice, urgent and tense. "Jinwoo!" Jinwoo turned immediately, meeting the guildmaster's troubled gaze. "Hunter Cha." Baek's words stopped short, but Jinwoo didn't need him to finish. He could feel it. Cha's life force was slipping away fast.